Learn English through story. The Two Roads of Regret. In a quiet, sun-soaked village surrounded by vast fields of golden wheat, there lived a man named Harold. Harold was a farmer, just as his father and grandfather had been. He owned a modest piece of land, which he had worked tirelessly for decades. The village respected him for his diligence and his ability to coax life from the soil, but there was something about Harold that set him apart from the others. He was known as a man of deep regret. Harold had once been in love with a woman named Clara. She was a school teacher in the village, and her kindness was known to all. Harold and Clara had grown up together, and as they reached adulthood, their friendship blossomed into something more. They shared dreams of a life together, raising children and growing old on the land that Harold's family had tended for generations. But Harold had a restless spirit, and when he was a young man, he dreamed of a life beyond the village. When Harold was 25, he was offered a chance to sell his land to a wealthy businessman who promised him a generous sum of money. The businessman spoke of the opportunities that awaited in the city: business ventures, fine living, and a future far beyond the simple life of farming. Harold was tempted. The idea of leaving the village behind and starting a new life in the city was alluring. He imagined himself dressed in fine clothes, living in a grand house, free from the back-breaking work of the fields. Clara, however, was rooted in the village. She loved the quiet life, the close-knit community, and the simple pleasures that came with it. She tried to persuade Harold to stay, to build their future together in the place they both knew so well. But Harold's mind was made up. He sold his land and left the village, leaving Clara behind with nothing but a promise that he would return. Years passed, and Harold built a successful life in the city. He became a wealthy man, investing in businesses and properties, and he lived in the kind of house he had once only dreamed of. But the city life was not without its costs. The hustle and bustle, the endless pursuit of more wealth, and the emptiness that came with it began to weigh on him. Harold missed the simplicity of the village, the peace of the fields, and most of all, he missed Clara. One day, while sitting alone in his opulent study, Harold received a letter from a friend in the village. The letter informed him that Clara had passed away after a brief illness. She had never married, the letter said, and had spent her life teaching the children of the village. Harold was devastated. The news hit him harder than he had expected, and he realized that the life he had built in the city was not the one he truly wanted. Harold returned to the village for Clara's funeral. As he walked through the familiar streets, memories flooded back of the time he and Clara spent together, of the dreams they once shared. The village had not changed much, but Harold felt like a stranger. The fields that had once been his were now owned by someone else, and the people he had known had grown old or moved away. At Clara's grave, Harold knelt down and whispered an apology, but it felt hollow. He knew that no words could undo the choices he had made. Clara was gone, and with her, the future they could have had together. Harold spent the night in the village, unable to sleep, haunted by the life he had abandoned. The next morning, as Harold walked through the village square, he saw a young man working in a field that had once belonged to him. The man was strong and determined, much like Harold had been in his youth. Curious, Harold approached him and struck up a conversation. The young man's name was Jacob, and he had recently bought the land with the money he had saved over the years. He spoke passionately about his plans to cultivate the land, to build a life there, and to start a family. As Harold listened, he saw himself in Jacob, a younger version of the man he once was, full of hope and ambition. But he also saw the roads that lay ahead, the choices that Jacob would have to make. Harold felt a pang of responsibility. He wanted to tell Jacob about his own mistakes, to warn him not to make the same ones, but he hesitated. Who was he to advise someone else when he had made such a mess of his own life? Days turned into weeks, and Harold stayed in the village, living in a small rented room. He began to help Jacob with the farm, sharing his knowledge and experience. The work brought him a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. He and Jacob became close, and eventually, Harold told him about Clara, about the life he had left behind, and about his regrets. Jacob listened carefully, taking in Harold's words. "But if you hadn't left," Jacob said, "you wouldn't have had the experiences you did, you wouldn't have learned what really mattered to you. Maybe that's why you were meant to leave, yet to realize what you truly value." Harold pondered Jacob's words. He had always seen his departure as a mistake, but perhaps there was some truth in what Jacob said. His time in the city had taught him the value of simplicity, of love, of community, lessons he might not have learned otherwise. But the cost had been high. Harold decided to stay in the village permanently. He used his wealth to buy back his old land and gave it to Jacob, ensuring that the farm would continue to thrive. In return, Jacob invited Harold to live with him and his growing family, treating him like a father. As the years passed, Harold found peace in the rhythms of the village. He became a beloved figure, known for his wisdom and generosity. Though he could never undo the past, he learned to accept it, and in doing so, he found a measure of redemption. The village, the fields, and the people became his world once more, and he spent his remaining years in the place he had always belonged. In the end, Harold understood that life is a series of choices, each leading us down a different path. While we cannot always avoid regret, we can choose how to live with it, and in doing so, we might find the road to peace. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.